Hello, welcome back to Main Character the podcast. So it's been a while, but I'm back for the foreseeable future, and I've upgraded my setting a little bit. I've got these headphones now. I feel like one of the Kelsey brothers. So gonna start a whole new season. Gonna have guests and everything that like a legit podcaster would actually do. But I'm also gonna do some episodes where it's just me talking about writing and other kind of related topics. I don't know how everybody has a podcast feels, but for me it feels like, I don't know, narcissistic to just keep talking about myself or just things that I've done or know about. So I really do want to have guests sooner or later, but for now it's just me. Now that it's my grand return, I think we'll kind of just take this one step at a time. So something I wanted to talk about today, because I think it's definitely a topic of conversation when I meet new people and they find out that I've written a book. The publishing industry itself kind of gets talked about a lot, or people, I guess, sort of don't always understand exactly how it works. So they're like, can I get your book on Amazon? And I'm like, yeah, you can. And people are like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And I don't know, I guess I feel like a little bit of an imposter in a way, because can pretty much, anybody can put anything on Amazon. I'm not special for this reason, for sure. This doesn't make me any kind of really super accomplished author. There's no prerequisite for publishing on Amazon. You're self-publishing. But all to say, I think even if I was, and there's plenty of reasons people don't like Amazon and think they're evil and that they're destroying the publishing industry, and I don't necessarily disagree with those things. All to say, when you self-publish in that way, the amount of royalties that you get to have are significantly higher. So I think Barbara Corcoran one day was on somebody's show, and I think it was James Altucher's show. He's self-published everything that he's ever done. And he was kind of explaining to her how this works. And he's like, yeah, I just put all my books on Amazon. I think one of them he only sold in Bitcoin, which is neither here nor there. But all to say, he's always had his own way of doing things. And she was like, what am I doing with Houghton Mifflin or whoever published her latest book, once she found out just a significance in percentage that she would get to take home if it was Amazon. I would imagine it's probably more if you completely self-publish and can print and bind the thing yourself, but that's not an option for most people. So that's why I went the way that I did. Obviously, that sort of disrupted the publishing industry, because the way that it used to be, and the way that I always came up thinking that my life would go, because I always knew I wanted to be an author. So I could tell just from reading all the time what those steps would entail, which is that I would write a novel, and then I would get an agent who would bring it to market, and then that person would find a publishing house that was interested in it and would take it, and then they would have an editor edit the book, and then it would be out there, and maybe people would like it, maybe they wouldn't, but you would be a published author. Somewhere in the time that I grew up in, that totally changed. And it was once Amazon became, they started as a bookseller, obviously, but then they got into basically every space imaginable, including publishing. So now you can kind of bootstrap the whole thing yourself, and obviously you have to pay for it up front, but you stand to make a lot more money once people buy it. But not even from a financial perspective. I think the way that the system was before, and why it's for disrupting and why that's not necessarily a bad thing, is that whoever at these publishing houses determined that your book was worthy of being published, they were kind of the tastemakers. Not unlike the music industry, I think, where, I don't know if you have some sort of musical talent that I surely do not, you'd go find somebody label willing to give you a record deal, and it's up to them whether or not you're worthy or good enough, and then they choose what songs get released to the public and what kind of blows up and becomes known. And now I think that's really more in the hands of the market, whether it's an author or a musician. They can release their art. Amazon is definitely the biggest way with books, but just the internet has made that more accessible for everybody, I think. So the artist can release their creation, and then the market determines if it's good or if it's not. And there's a lot of musicians who have kind of like gone viral that probably never would have gotten a record deal. I think with publishing and writing, it's kind of the same way. Howie, he's a really prolific writer, and I know that he had written, well, I say I know, but I could totally be wrong here. I think it was 7 books that he worked at a bookstore, and I believe he had published 7 books before one of them really took off and became a huge hit. But certainly it was more than one, and he kept at it, and that's a real inspiration to me, because I think that takes a lot of perseverance. And obviously it took several years to gain traction. I believe he's with a publishing house now, but the point is, in a different time, he might have been completely overlooked by a publishing house, and his life would be completely different, and as a society, we'd be missing out on what he has to offer. And that's also the thing I think I've noticed about publishing houses for sure. I would also say the music industry, there's some parallels. If you're really famous, Kylie Jenner or Michelle Obama, and you want to write a book, of course they're going to give you a huge advance because they know they're going to make a lot of money off of you. But most people, they're not going to put as much effort into promoting it until you have a following. So it's like this catch-22. If you have a following, then why do you need them? And I think probably at a certain point it gets to be that it's time. It takes a lot of time to have your hand in the process yourself, and then less time, like the more successful you get, the less time you have, it's easier to delegate, and then that's probably where that makes sense. But I feel really fortunate to live in a time where that's an attainable dream for anybody who has, I guess, sort of a talent and a passion for something like that. Because like I said, when I grew up, I never imagined it would be that way. And then by the time I became old enough to pursue that, things shifted in society, and I was really lucky to be a part of that. So I recently read this book, and I did a book review on it. It's called How to Resist Amazon and Why, by this guy by the name of Danny Kane, and he's an independent bookseller in Lawrence, Kansas. The store sounds really cool. I'd love to check it out sometime. But he talks about kind of the harm that Amazon has done basically in small businesses, probably globally, but we all live in America, so certainly here. And after reading the book, it kind of made me want to change my ways. My hope is that, I don't know what's going to happen with Amazon. They're a huge conglomerate, obviously, but that their process of sort of putting that ownership back in the hands of the artists can be repeated, maybe on a smaller, more local scale. And even if there's not quite as much financially to be gained from that, I would think that model is kind of the way forward, because like in an ideal world, you'd get to do 2 things. You'd get to support your local community and infrastructure around you, and you'd get to put your art out into the world for the world to decide what they think of it, regardless of what some, like tastemaker would think. So those are kind of my thoughts on, I guess, what the industry used to be like and what it's like now, and where it could realistically go and where I hope to see it go. That's how I was able to realize my dream of being an author. And until anything really significantly changes, I think that's I am working on right now. I'm working on a series, but then separately from that, I recently came up with an idea that's much more succinct and clear, and it would just be 1 book, and I think I could knock it out fairly quickly. So I would say I am working on my 2nd novel now. I'm going to ramp that up more in the next few weeks or so, but I think I'm not going to do everything exactly the way I did it the first time I published my book, because of course I've learned from that experience, so I won't do things that didn't work, but I'll take the things that did work and more or less just repeat that same self-publishing process. Again, I think as much as there's downfalls to the technology that we have, it certainly makes a lot of opportunities a lot easier for a lot of people, and I feel very fortunate to be at the stage in my, I guess, writing journey that I am at that time in human history. So I just think that's really cool.